They are particularly angry at a couple of things on the geopolitical space, if you like. The US just before Christmas agreed an 11 billion package of arms sales to Taiwan.
China has launched a major military exercise in the last 24 hours, simulating a blockade of Taiwan. At least 89 jets were deployed around the island, as well as a large number of ships. The Times' China correspondent Richard Spencer is with us. Hi, Richard.
Good afternoon.
This sounds like pretty scary stuff from Taiwan's perspective. Tell us about the scale of it.
Yeah, so there's two things here, really. One is, I mean, these exercises are pretty regular, and China does them a couple of times a year. So in one sense, it's pretty much business as always, business as usual. There's a couple of things different this year. One, and I think the most interesting thing to me is the level of state media propaganda that has surrounded this exercise. It's really all over state media with full descriptions of why China is doing it, what they're hoping to achieve. And there's various important messages there. One is they are particularly angry at a couple of things on the geopolitical space, if you like. The US just before Christmas agreed an 11 billion package of arms sales to Taiwan, including a lot of the sort of things that Ukraine has been using to defend itself against Russia, like high-level missile systems, particularly the HIMARS long-range missile system, which itself sends a message that sort of, America looks at Taiwan at the moment like Europe looks at Ukraine, if you like, something that should be defended against a larger neighbor. So that's one thing that's really annoyed the Chinese, and they refer to that repeatedly today. So they're saying this is a response to that. And then they've also made clear what they're actually planning for, which is, they've said they're targeting the two biggest ports in Taiwan, which is Keelung in the north, the big deep water port, and Kaohsiung in the south, which is the big sort of roll-on, roll-off container port that is vital, in fact, to world trade, let alone regional trade. So it's saying, if Taiwan keeps indicating that it's not part of China, that it's going to declare independence, this is how we will respond. We will blockade Taiwan and bring it to its knees that way. So it's sending a lot of big messages, this exercise.
Yeah, although, I mean, that framing of responding to the US selling this huge weapons package to Taiwan, I mean, it's $11 billion worth of weapons, isn't it? But framing this as a response to that sort of misses the fact that they've been saying quite openly for years now that they intend to take Taiwan. It's just that they, as you're indicating, they see Taiwan as part of China anyway.
Well, so language is quite important here. They haven't been saying that they're going to take Taiwan. What they say is that Taiwan will be reunified at some stage with China, but it's left very vague how it intends to achieve that. So the reason this blockade issue is important is because although some people think that, China is preparing to actually launch a full-scale invasion of Taiwan, a bit like Russia did with Ukraine, China itself doesn't say that. And President Trump said he was privately assured by President Xi that he had no intention of launching a full-blown invasion. So the issue here is if China tries to put pressure on Taiwan, either through economic means or political means, just to isolate it and gradually extend its sway over Taiwan, start trying to pressure it to do things in accordance with Chinese wishes, up to and including sanctions and a blockade of Taiwan if Taiwan doesn't come quietly, if you like. Then it's like daring America to do its worst, like, for example, try and break the blockade by force. And that's when you might see a war break out in China, between China and America on this scenario. And I think that's the scenario we're really looking at here.
And who do you think is being the more provocative party? I'm trying to look at this as fair-mindedly as possible because, as you say, from Europe, people would naturally sort of see Taiwan as the Ukrainian figure here. But who's been more provocative? Is it the US giving a weapons package to Taiwan, or is it China exercising this drill?
I think the underlying provocation, if you like, if you buy the argument that Ukraine by moving away from Russia and towards the West over the last 20 years, whether you frame that as, Ukraine wanting to join NATO or wanting to join the EU, or just gradually becoming less Russian and more Western European, if you like. That's what Russia, claims as the provocation in Ukraine's case. And you can see the same thing, argument being made with when it comes to Taiwan. As time goes by, it's now the two were effectively separated in 1949, in according to the way that China looks at it. As time goes on, as Taiwan's democratic institutions become more and more rooted. It made its great transition to democracy in the 80s and 90s. As that becomes fixed, Taiwan looks less and less like China, less and less, reunifiable, if you like, and more like another member of the East Asian American alliance, like South Korea or Japan, for example. And that's what China regards as a provocation. Now, obviously, they will use things like, weapon sales. But of course, China, the weapon sales to Taiwan are absolutely nothing compared with the China's own military modernization and advancement and development of its Navy and Air Force. So it can't really say that that's the provocation, but it can, if you look at it from China's point of view, say that, without this pressure, the chances of Taiwan eventually becoming Chinese again just recede just naturally with time.
Commendable clarity. Thank you, Richard. That was really helpful. The Times of China correspondent there, Richard Spencer. Cheers.
China has launched a new round of military drills around Taiwan as a warning against external interference. Codenamed as Justice Mission 2025, the Chinese army have said that the Navy, Air Force and rocket forces have all been dispatched for the drills, which aim to simulate the seizure and blockade of the island. Let's get the latest with Lizzie Lee Fellow on Chinese economy at the Centre for China Analysis. Lizzie, thanks for joining me. Are drills on this scale anything new? Will this all be familiar territory for the Taiwanese?
Well, this is at this point familiar territory for Taiwan, unfortunately. But I do want to point out that this is China's first large-scale exercise around Taiwan in several months. So it ends a period of relative calm across this strait, and the PLA is calling it a stir warning. I see it more about signaling of resolve rather than the start of some kind of escalatory military action.
What do you think prompted the drills?
Well, the timing is certainly not accidental, but I also don't think it's driven by a single trigger, if you will. The most immediate backdrop is the Trump administration's newly announced arms sale package to Taiwan, which is over $11 billion, including HIMARS rocket systems. This exercise kind of functions as a more muscular reply to that. And also there's an internal Chinese military dimension. President Xi Jinping just formally appointed a new commander to the PLA's Eastern Theater Command, which is a PLA unit responsible for Taiwan. So these drills can serve as an early test or of a coordination of that new leadership. And also, this moment is very delicate for the PLA. The PLA is still recovering from deep corruption scandals and also a stream of internal purges. And also, as you know, it's not just about Taiwan or Washington. Japan is very much part of the audience. The recent remarks by the Japanese Prime Minister suggesting, according to Beijing, that a Taiwan contingency can trigger some kind of, Japanese action or Japan's right to collective self-defense certainly touched a nerve in Beijing. And in fact, if you look at the elements of the exercise, especially activity concentrated at the eastern part of Taiwan, they are designed to warn Tokyo against a deeper involvement in Taiwan affairs.
And will this have an impact on day-to-day lives of Taiwanese?
Well, certainly. As you see, Taiwan's civil Aviation Authority already warned that the exercises would disrupt air travel after China designated a temporary danger zone. And Taiwanese officials estimate that more than 100,000 travelers could be affected as early as Tuesday.
Thank you, Lizzie Lee, who's a fellow on Chinese economy at the Center for China Analysis.